Single dad, CEO mocked for bringing disabled daughter to dine. But a waitress stood up and changed everything. She spilled a glass of water, and the entire diner fell silent. But what happened next would change 3 lives forever. A scarred waitress, a little girl in a wheelchair, and a father too broken to cry, each carrying invisible wounds. What began as a simple breakfast became a quiet unraveling of pain, resilience, and the kind of kindness that doesn't ask to be seen. This isn't just a story. It's a slow burning miracle wrapped in blueberry syrup and silence. Stay until the end. What you'll feel might just stay with you forever. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. The diner bell chimed softly, barely rising above the patter of light morning rain. It was the kind of drizzle that left the streets glistening and the sky a pale, reflective gray. People moved in slow rhythms, half asleep in the early hour. The corner diner was nearly empty, just a retired couple sharing toast in silence and a young man scrolling through his phone at the counter. Everything was still. Then the black sedan pulled up. The driver's door opened first, followed by the rear. A man stepped out, late 40s polished shoes, dark tailored coat, and a briefcase slung across one shoulder. But what mattered was what he did next. He reached into the back seat and with precise care lifted out a little girl. Her name was Lily, 8 years old. Brown hair gathered in uneven pigtails, a polka-dotted headband slipping slightly to one side. Her legs lay motionless beneath the blanket covering her lap. She sat quietly in her pastel wheelchair as her father Jacob adjusted her scarf. Her gaze was calm, but the slight tension in her jaw betrayed something else. Inside, the diner heads turned. The quiet rustle of jackets, the muffled squeak of chairs adjusting a fork paused midair. Jacob guided Lily through the entrance, one hand on the chair, the other holding the door open. A soft hum from Lily, a half-whispered song off-key and breathy, floated into the silence. No one smiled. No one spoke. Jacob noticed. He always did. He nodded briefly to the man behind the counter, then maneuvered Lily toward a corner table. But before they even reached the booth, Lily's hand trembled. A small, clear glass on the table tipped. Water spilled, cascading across the surface like a slow-moving wave. The diner froze. A woman in her 20s glanced away. An older gentleman stiffened, pushing his plate an inch further from the spill. Jacob's jaw tightened. His movements were sharp, practiced, efficient, pulling napkins from the dispenser, dabbing at the table, ignoring the whisper of eyes on them. He didn't look up. He was used to this part. But someone else moved first. Claire stepped out from behind the kitchen curtain. She wasn't remarkable at first glance. Petite hair pulled back in a loose braid. A faint line of a scar traced the edge of her wrist as she dried her hands on a towel. Her apron was smudged with flour, and her sneakers had seen better days. But her eyes were still and steady, the kind of gaze that didn't flinch when someone looked fragile. She knelt beside Lily, not hurried, not performative. She simply knelt, took a clean cloth from her apron, and wiped the spill in slow, deliberate strokes. Her eyes remained fixed on the little girl's, her voice soft but certain. "Do you feel like pancakes or waffles this morning?" she asked. Lily blinked. Her fingers tightened on the blanket across her lap. "Blueberry waffles," she murmured. Claire nodded. "Excellent choice. I'll make them extra pretty. No pity. No spectacle, just presence." Jacob paused, watching. For a brief second, he seemed as if he might say something. His mouth opened, but he closed it again, jaw tight. Claire finished cleaning and laid a dry napkin gently across Lily's lap. Then, with the same quiet grace, she stood and returned to the kitchen. The tension in the diner loosened almost imperceptibly. A couple resumed eating. The man at the counter looked back at his phone, and Jacob sat down across from his daughter, not speaking, but not as tightly wound as he had been. His hands loosened, his brow unknotted. When Claire returned with their order, perfectly crisp waffles, topped with a tiny whipped cream smiley face, and a handful of blueberries, Lily grinned. Jacob said nothing, but his gaze lingered on Claire a beat longer than necessary. He didn't understand it yet, but something had changed, and so began something neither of them could have imagined: how a single quiet act in a forgotten corner of a rainy city could slowly begin to rebuild two hearts, one that had never learned how to walk, and one that had forgotten how to feel. If you felt something stir in your chest during this part, make sure to subscribe and join us for the next chapters of this heartfelt story. The journey of Claire, Jacob, and little Lily is just beginning, and trust me, the next parts will move you even deeper. The rain had stopped by the next morning, but the clouds still hung low, the air crisp with the scent of wet pavement. The diner opened at the same hour it always did, and Claire moved through her routine, wiping down tables, refilling the sugar jars, preparing the prep station without rush or hesitation. She didn't expect to see them again so soon, but the black sedan was already parked out front. Jacob entered. First his coat open and damp at the hem. He looked less polished today, as if something had interrupted his usual rhythm. Behind him, Lily wheeled herself through the doorway. Her sweater was a soft lilac today, the sleeves slightly too long, one cuff damp from brushing against the car door. She glanced around the diner, then smiled when she spotted Claire. Claire returned the smile, the quiet kind that didn't need words. "Same table?" she asked, already clearing the space. Jacob nodded, but his eyes didn't meet hers. He looked tired, not just physically, but in that deep, invisible way people do when they've been carrying something too heavy for too long. Claire brought over a menu and a glass of water with a bendable straw. She folded a napkin carefully beside Lily's plate and laid a fresh notepad on the table to take their order. "I'll get the same," Lily said, confidently. "Blueberry waffles." But no smiley face this time, just normal. Claire tilted her head, pretending to consider. "You sure it's hard to make them smile without syrup eyes?" Lily giggled. "Okay, one eye, not two." Claire grinned, nodded, and headed for the kitchen. As she passed Jacob, she noticed the way his fingers tapped the edge of the table, restless, like a man on the verge of saying something. But he said nothing. Back in the kitchen, as batter sizzled on the griddle, Claire's thoughts drifted. There was something familiar in Lily's laugh. Not the sound exactly, but the tone, the way it filled a room with something soft, something she hadn't remembered in years. When she returned with the waffles, Lily was watching the raindrops still clinging to the window. Jacob was staring at his phone, unreadable. Claire set the plate down and leaned slightly toward Lily Chef's special one eye, only extra crispy. Lily looked up, nodded solemnly. "Looks delicious." Claire started to turn away, but Jacob cleared his throat. "You said yesterday that you grew up in the city," he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "I did," Claire replied. He paused, Ever think about leaving it? Claire glanced at the window I used to. Then I realized, sometimes, it's not the place that needs to change. Jacob gave a faint nod, like he understood more than he wanted to admit. Lily was busy with her food, her small hands gripping the fork with effort, each motion careful. My wife passed when Lily was just a baby, Jacob said. Suddenly, we weren't prepared. I wasn't prepared. And I've spent the last 8 years trying to compensate for that. Claire didn't answer immediately. She just listened, fully without interruption or interpretation. It's not the caretaking that's hard, Jacob went on. It's the silence. The moments when she doesn't ask for anything, but I know she still needs something. Claire exhaled, her eyes softening. The hardest part of love is recognizing what isn't said. Jacob nodded slowly. Exactly. Lily's voice broke the moment. Dad, can we bring Miss Claire one of the pictures I made yesterday? Jacob blinked. Clearly, surprised. Sure if she wants it. Claire crouched beside the girl. I'd love that. It's of a fox, Lily explained. But it looks more like a squirrel because I messed up the ears. Claire laughed genuinely. Even better. I've always wanted a squirrel-fox hybrid on my fridge. Jacob chuckled under his breath. It was the first time she saw that sound come from him. When the meal was over, Claire watched them leave. Lily waved. Jacob didn't. But he glanced back once as he opened the door. That night, when Claire closed up the diner, she found a napkin folded neatly on Lily's side of the table. On it, a crayon drawing a crooked animal with enormous ears and a tiny heart in the corner. Underneath it, simply read, "Thank you." Claire held it in both hands like something rare. Because maybe it was, and maybe tomorrow. When the doorbell chimed again, and the rain returned, she would be waiting, not just to serve, but to see, to remind a little girl that her laughter could change a room, and to remind a tired man that someone had heard him, even when he hadn't said a word. The autumn air grew colder over the next few days, the diner's windows fogging slightly with each morning's steam and breath. Claire arrived before dawn, as she always did, folding napkins with the same deliberate care she gave to everything. She didn't look up when the black sedan returned. She didn't need to. She knew it was them. Jacob entered first, wearing a scarf. This time, his face shadowed with sleeplessness. Lily followed, bundled in a thick coat with stars on the sleeves, her wheelchair decorated with 2 small dangling keychains, a fox, and what looked like a hand-drawn daisy. Claire noticed, though she said nothing. They sat at their usual table. Lily smiled. Claire offered a nod of welcome and slid over menus they didn't really need. As she turned to go, Lily called out softly, "Miss Claire, do you have any more of those pink napkins?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "The ones with the little flowers." Lily nodded eagerly. "They make my hands warm." Claire smiled, then ducked behind the counter. A few moments later, she returned with one slightly faded from washing, but still soft. She unfolded it gently and laid it on Lily's lap. Jacob watched this, his jaw-set eyes flicking from his daughter to Claire, then down again. There was something about how Claire moved. Quiet, careful, never hurried. It unsettled him, not because it was wrong, but because it was unfamiliar. He had spent years managing chaos, making decisions under pressure, solving problems with money efficiency or discipline. But Claire's kindness was none of those things. It didn't fix it, didn't lecture it, simply stayed. While Lily ate, Claire served other tables. yet her presence remained. Near Jacob noticed this too, the way she seemed to orbit people without intruding. A gentle gravity after breakfast, when Lily was coloring on a napkin with a crayon from her pocket. Jacob remained behind while she spoke with another waitress. When Claire passed by again, he spoke. "She had a nightmare last night," he said abruptly. Woke up shaking. Claire paused, not in alarm, but in attention. She kept calling for her mother. Jacob added voice lower now. "But she never even knew her. I don't understand how she can miss someone she never met." Claire sat at the edge of the booth, folding her apron with idle hands. "We don't have to know someone to feel the shape of their absence." Jacob let out a breath that sounded more like a release than agreement. "She doesn't talk about it much. She doesn't have to," Claire replied. "Her silence tells the story." For a moment he was quiet. Then he said, "I didn't cry when she was born. I didn't cry when her mother passed. But the other day, when she tipped out of her chair, and you held her like she'd belonged to you since forever, I felt something break." Claire met his gaze. Not with pity, not with judgment, just presence. "It's not breaking," she said gently. "It's opening." He didn't respond, only nodded. Once Lily's crayon dropped onto the floor, Jacob bent to retrieve it, but Claire was already there, scooping it up and placing it in Lily's hand with a small squeeze. "Draw something happy," she whispered. As they prepared to leave, Lily turned to Claire with a mischievous grin. "I made a secret drawing." "Can I see?" Claire asked. Lily shook her head, then pulled out a folded paper from under her coat and handed it to Jacob. Later she said, "When you're not so busy." Jacob pocketed the paper and looked at Claire again, this time longer. There was something in his eyes now, not softened, not healed, but willing. That night, Jacob stood in his office, the city lights blinking outside his window like a restless pulse. He unfolded Lily's paper, a drawing of the diner sketched in childlike lines, a little girl in a wheelchair, a woman kneeling, and a man standing just behind them, arms slightly raised, like he was trying to reach but didn't quite know how. In the corner, Lily had written in crooked letters, "Dad, Puls, Miss Claire, Puls, me." Okay. Jacob stared at the drawing for a long time, his thumb brushing the edge of the paper like it might tear if he let go too fast. Maybe he didn't have to understand everything right now. Maybe it was enough to sit in the quiet, to hold the drawing in his hands, and believe for the first time in a long time that okay was a place he could begin. The days slipped into a quiet rhythm. Jacob and Lily came to the diner more regularly now, not every morning, but often enough that the staff stopped noticing, and the regulars started smiling when they arrived. The corner table near the window had become theirs unspoken, but understood. The air grew colder, and one morning, when frost clung to the windows, Lily arrived in a bright red coat and a matching scarf. Her cheeks flushed pink with the chill. Her eyes lit up when Claire appeared. Claire had prepared the table already. A soft cushion on the chair for Jacob and Lily's napkin folded just so, with a small embroidered star in the corner. This time, Lily touched it like it was something rare. "You made this one too?" she asked. Claire nodded. "For winter days, stars remind us the dark never stays forever." Lily smiled, and Jacob, holding his coffee, said nothing but watched. It wasn't long before something new took root. Jacob began staying after Lily finished her meals. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. Claire didn't press. She simply brought a refill of coffee and sat when there was time. One quiet morning, as the diner buzzed with soft chatter and the radio played a tune from decades ago, Jacob leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped. "I think I forgot how to be a person," he said quietly. "Not a businessman, not a provider, just a man who feels things." Claire didn't answer right away. She looked at him with the kind of stillness that didn't need words to fill it. Jacob looked toward Lily, who was across the diner, showing a drawing to one of the cooks. She never judges, but sometimes I see it in her face, how she notices my absence, even when I'm sitting right there. "You mean the way someone can be present in body, but not in heart?" Claire asked gently. He nodded. "After her mother died, I told myself I'd focus on giving Lily everything she needed: therapy school, safety, but not softness." "Because it felt too fragile?" Claire asked. Jacob's hands tensed. "Because I thought it would break me." Claire leaned back slightly. "Maybe that's the thing about being broken. Sometimes it's how the light gets in." He let the words settle. The sound of dishes clinking in the background faded. He looked at Claire not as a server, not as a stranger, but as someone who had become part of his quiet story without him noticing when. "Do you ever wonder why you stayed here?" he asked suddenly. "In this little place, you're clearly someone who could be somewhere else." Claire paused. "I used to think I was running away from things, but it turns out I was running toward something. I just didn't know what until recently." "What was it?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she glanced toward Lily. "Sometimes we don't get to choose the people we need. They just arrive, and they don't always come in the form we expect." Jacob's jaw tightened, but his eyes shimmered faintly. "I never knew. I needed someone like her, or you." Claire smiled soft and sure. "That's the best kind of knowing." The door opened, then letting in a breeze of cold wind and a flurry of leaves. Claire stood to serve another table, but Jacob's voice stopped her. "Claire," he said, his tone different this time, hesitant, almost vulnerable. Would you consider joining something I'm building?" She tilted her head. "My company is launching a new initiative, Tools for Disabled Children, Assistive Tech, that doesn't feel clinical things, that make them feel seen." His voice trembled with sincerity. "I have designers, engineers, but what I don't have is someone who understands the small things. The human part." Claire was quiet. "You want me to advise?" "No." Jacob said, "I want you to co-design, not because of a resume, but because of what you see. The things no blueprint captures." Claire looked at him long and hard. For a moment, her hand touched the worn scar on her wrist beneath the cuff of her sleeve. Then she nodded slowly. "I'll think about it," she said, "but only if we make sure it's for them. Not for headlines, not for charity, just for the kids." Jacob met her gaze, and for once, it was without any armor. "That's exactly what I want." As he left that morning, Claire returned to the counter and stood still, her hands resting on the coffee pot. She watched Jacob place a soft wool hat over Lily's head, watched him kneel to check her wheels, and heard Lily's bright laughter as they stepped into the frost-lined morning. She didn't know yet if she'd say yes, but something in her had already begun to lean forward. Just a little, just enough. The weeks that followed brought an unfamiliar pulse into Claire's life. The rhythm of the diner remained unchanged. Plates clinking coffee, brewing voices murmuring over morning papers. But something beneath that routine had shifted. She spent her evenings sketching not of landscapes or random thoughts as she once had in secret, but of wheels, cushions, and small handrests that wouldn't bruise when a child leaned too long. Her fingers, once blistered from scrubbing dishes, now stained with pencil and graphite. Jacob had sent her a folder, simple diagrams from his team ideas, from engineers' digital mock-ups that looked sleek but empty. Claire opened them and saw what was missing. The warmth, the nuance, the understanding of a child who couldn't speak up for discomfort or couldn't explain that certain textures made her feel unsafe. When Jacob returned to the diner on a crisp Thursday morning, Claire met him, not with a tray of coffee, but a folded stack of hand-drawn papers. "These aren't professional," she warned, "but they're real." He unfolded the first page slowly. His brow furrowed, not with skepticism, but with concentration. Each line was hand-rendered annotations written in small script, padding. "Here helps after long use slope slightly to ease transfers. Child might hide a toy. Here keep space open." Jacob looked up. "You made all this?" Claire nodded. "It's what I've seen over time. With Lily. With others. These are more valuable than what my team's been producing." Claire didn't answer. She didn't need to. He knew. They began meeting weekly away from the diner. At first, she felt like a trespasser in Jacob's world of polished glass offices and silent elevators. But soon, that feeling gave way to a quiet confidence. She didn't wear suits. She didn't speak the industry lingo. But when she walked into the development room with her sketches in a worn notebook, people listened. Lily visited once, rolling into the sleek design space with her small backpack filled with markers and hope. She saw the prototype Jacob's team had been working on, streamlined, sleek, cool-toned. She stared at it, then turned to Claire and said, "It looks like something from a hospital. Can we make it less lonely?" That word lonely echoed through Claire's mind for days. She brought it up in the next meeting. Children don't need equipment that reminds them they're different. She said, they need something that reminds them they belong. One of the designers frowned. "But we've already chosen the materials, eh?" Claire remained still. "Then maybe we chose wrong." Jacob watched the exchange, then nodded. "She's right. Start over, if we must. Let's make something that feels like a friend, not a reminder." Back at the diner, Claire's co-workers started noticing the shift. She still washed dishes, still served tables, but sometimes she'd pause mid-shift to sketch something on a napkin. And sometimes when a child spilled juice or cried over a dropped spoon, she knelt a little longer, then needed not to clean, but to understand. One afternoon, Jacob stopped by alone. The sun dipped low through the windows, casting long beams across the counter. He placed a small velvet box in front of Claire. She stared at it. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "Just open it." Inside was a small silver pin, a delicate daisy carved into the surface. On the back, etched in tiny script, were the words, "For the ones who stay." Claire blinked, her throat tightening. Why? Because when everything fell apart? Jacob said, his voice low, "You didn't just show up. You stayed. You listened. You saw." Claire closed the box carefully, hands trembling just slightly. "I didn't do anything grand. That's exactly why it mattered." As he stood to leave, she called out, not loudly, just enough for him to hear, "I'm not sure I know how to do this all the way. This project, this change," he turned. "You're already doing it." That night, Claire walked home under a violet sky. She didn't rush. In her bag was a prototype drawing Lily had added to a pink crayon heart where the company logo would go. In her coat pocket, the velvet box. For the first time in years, Claire allowed herself to imagine a future where her voice could not only be heard, but shape something real. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going. The official launch of the new assistive design was just weeks away, and Claire found herself in a world she never imagined entering. Her sketches, once scrawled in the back of napkins and diner receipts, had been transformed into a full-scale prototype. The device wasn't just a chair, it was a space. A space for safety, creativity, and dignity. Claire visited the design lab every few days now, always with her brown leather notebook in hand. The team had begun to defer to her insight not out of obligation, but out of trust. When something didn't work, she noticed first. When a feature felt too clinical or out of place, she explained why, in a way that reached beyond technical logic. Jacob, who had once been known in his industry for efficiency and aloof brilliance, now sat across the table from Claire, listening with intent. One afternoon, she brought in a small handmade cushion stitched with tiny stars. Lily told me the headrest feels cold. This might help. He ran his fingers over the fabric. How did you think of this? I didn't. I just listened. The foundation they'd created wasn't just about accessibility. It had become a movement of sorts. Jacob had poured funding into expanding the initiative, gathering feedback from families across the country. And at the center of this wave was Claire, a woman who had once believed her role in life was to clean, serve, and fade into the background. At home, her apartment had changed too. The kitchen table, once bare, now overflowed with notes, swatches, and prototypes. Photos of Lily in her new wheelchair, painted lavender and adorned with custom decals, were pinned beside blueprints of next phase designs. Claire didn't call herself a designer, but she knew what felt right, what helped a child feel seen. Then came the day that made everything feel real. Jacob asked Claire to speak at the public unveiling of the final prototype. She froze. Me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You're the heart of this project. No one can tell this story better. Claire had never spoken into a microphone before. Her voice had never echoed through a room of expectant faces. She'd only ever been the one in the back, making sure everything ran smoothly without recognition. But when she looked at the photographs of children who had tested the new design, smiling, upright, joyful, she understood why her voice mattered now. The event took place at a children's hospital. The room was filled with parents, physicians, designers, and young patients. As Claire stepped onto the small stage, she spotted Lily in the front row, wearing a sunflower dress and her new mobility chair. Claire held the microphone with two hands, steadying herself. Then she spoke. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I used to mop floors and refill coffee cups. And for a long time, I thought that was all I could offer. But then a little girl spilled water in my diner, and everything changed. The room quieted still as breath. She didn't ask for sympathy. She just wanted to be seen. And somehow, in seeing her, I started to see myself. Not as someone small, or someone who could only do what was assigned to her, but as someone who could help build something better. She paused. Lily smiled. From her chair, eyes wide and proud. This design isn't perfect, but it's made with love, with mistakes, with listening. It's made by a team that believes every child deserves to feel like they belong. As Claire stepped down from the stage, the applause that followed wasn't loud and thunderous. It was gentle, heartfelt, rising slowly, like a wave that had been waiting its turn to speak. After the event, a mother approached her. "You said what I never had words for," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you." That night, Jacob handed Claire a folder labeled Phase 2. Inside were sketches for new adaptive tools, writing aids, sensory-friendly desks, communication devices. He looked at her. "We're just getting started." Claire nodded slowly, the weight of her journey sinking in. From a silent girl in an orphanage to a woman who stood before a crowd and moved hearts with her truth. She had once believed she was only meant to serve. Now she was shaping futures. The days that followed the unveiling of the new design were quieter, but not without depth. Claire returned to her routines with a sense of purpose she'd never known before. The diner still opened at 7 sharp, and she still brewed the first pot of coffee, wiped down tables, and welcomed in the early risers. But there was a difference now in how she moved, in how she saw herself, and in how others looked at her. Word about the project had spread further than she ever expected. Parents from other cities wrote in asking about the design, asking if their children might be next. Designers and engineers reached out with offers to collaborate. But the most unexpected part came one ordinary afternoon when the door to the diner opened and a woman in her late 20s walked in holding a child's hand. Claire recognized her instantly. Timothy's older sister. Timothy, the boy she had once given her only silver spoon to back in the orphanage. The boy who had been beaten for being too small, too quiet. The boy who had disappeared from the orphanage one day and she had never heard of again. Until now. The woman approached the counter slowly, unsure. "I wasn't sure it was really you," she said, "but the newspaper had your picture. I remembered your eyes." Claire's hands stilled. He's alive," the woman said with a small smile. "Thriving. Actually, he's a teacher now, and he remembers. He remembers everything, especially the girl who gave him a silver spoon when no one else gave him anything." Claire's breath caught in her throat. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out something wrapped in soft cloth. When she unwrapped it, Claire saw it, a small, scratched silver spoon, the rose still faint on the handle, worn, but unmistakably the same. "He kept it," she whispered. The woman nodded. "Said, it reminded him that kindness doesn't need to be grand to be unforgettable." Claire held the spoon as if it were sacred. All the years between then and now collapsed into that single moment. She wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Instead, she placed the spoon behind the counter in the drawer with the daisy-embroidered handkerchief and Sophie's thank you drawings. That evening, as the sky turned the color of steel and lavender, Jacob arrived with Lily. They took their usual seat by the window, the one with the best morning light. Lily beamed as she wheeled herself across the floor with ease, her new chair gliding effortlessly. She wore a pale pink headband and had 2 crayons tucked behind her ears. "Guess what?" she asked as Claire came to their table. "What's that?" Claire replied, kneeling down beside her like always. "I want to be an inventor, like you." Claire blinked. "Me, you made things better. You made me smile when I spilled, and then you made this chair. That means you invent things that help people." That's what I want to do." Jacob smiled quietly from behind his coffee cup. Claire didn't say much in return. She didn't need to. She just reached out and touched Lily's hand gently. Later, when Jacob got up to pay, he lingered near the counter. Claire poured him a fresh cup of tea without asking. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous," she teased gently. He smiled. "I want to create a permanent division at the company one that focuses on accessibility innovations, real things, community-led ground-level design. And I want you to run it." Claire stared at him, stunned. "Run it. You've already been doing it, Claire. You've led with intuition, with empathy, and with a vision no one else could see. It's time to make it official." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window at Lily, who was sketching something on a napkin. Another idea, another world to imagine better. And then Claire nodded, not out of ambition, but from a place deeper than that. From the part of her that had learned to survive by being invisible and was now choosing fully and freely to be seen. That night, as she closed the diner and turned off the last light, Claire paused by the counter. She opened the drawer and looked at the silver spoon, the napkin with blueberry syrup, and the handkerchief. They were still small things, but now they were the evidence of a life transformed by love loss and the radical power of kindness. Not loud, not showy, but steady. And when she whispered to the silence of the room, she didn't say goodbye. She said, "Let's begin." The story of Claire, Jacob, and Lily is not one of grand spectacles or sweeping drama. It is a tale rooted in the quiet everyday moments that reveal our deepest truths. It begins in a modest diner, where a waitress with a past scarred by silence meets a child whose presence shifts the very air in the room. Lily, full of light, despite her fragile frame, enters the story on wheels and leaves an indelible mark, not just on the floor where she once fell, but on the hearts of those who watched her rise again. Claire, once convinced her life amounted to nothing more than mopping spills and folding napkins, discovers that small acts done with sincerity can ripple far beyond their moment. Through her interaction with Lily and her father, Jacob, a man burdened with responsibility and haunted by unspoken grief, Claire unlocks parts of herself she thought were long buried. The diner becomes more than a place to eat. It becomes a sanctuary of quiet transformation. Jacob, once known only for his cool logic and corporate success, slowly begins to thaw in the presence of Claire's unwavering compassion. The fall that Lily takes and the way Claire catches her, not just physically, but emotionally, becomes a moment of revelation. Jacob, for the first time, allows himself to cry, to feel, to see. He begins to understand that strength isn't always in control. It's in connection. Together, the three embark on an unexpected journey that begins with pancakes and napkins and leads to designing assistive technology for children like Lily. What began with a scribbled crayon drawing on a diner napkin becomes the blueprint for a new division in Jacob's company, one that places empathy, real-world experience, and inclusivity at its heart. Claire, once invisible, becomes the co-designer, the heart behind the innovation, not because she had credentials, but because she had lived the very things that others overlooked. The deeper message from this story is clear. Kindness doesn't require status or applause. It requires presence. It's found in the quiet gesture, the steady hand, the choice to kneel beside someone instead of looking away. Claire teaches us that being seen is one of the most healing experiences a human can offer. Jacob reminds us that no amount of success can replace human connection, and Lily, with her open heart and fearless drawings, reminds us that the future is shaped not just by data, but by imagination and trust. So what about you? In a world moving too fast, where do you see kindness quietly making a difference? Has someone ever done something small that changed everything for you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's learn from each other's stories. And if this story moved, you please consider subscribing. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content that reminds us of the power found in the simplest human moments. Because sometimes, all it takes to change a life is to truly see it.